Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only.
Let's go ahead and get into this. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Super2. Joining me today is...
the Comics Kid 2099.
And the Geek for Fun.
Indeed. And today we're continuing our Batman War Games saga by talking about Batman War Times and Batman War something or other and Batman War Coffee. No, we're done. We're finally over. It was a cool idea. It was fun, little change up, but yeah, that did get a little much, so I hope everyone enjoyed, a month's worth of Batman War Games coverage. I'll throw this out there, the most complete review of the War Games saga you will find on YouTube. Anyway, so no, we're back to our normal format, and Ruben picked a discussion topic for us. Ruben, what are we talking about today?
When is it okay to do a reboot or a remake? I think you said, to put it in like 5 words or less, like the timeline of doing a reboot or a remake.
Yeah.
In movies.
Yeah. So I thought about this one a bit, and to give like an immediate answer to the general question, I really like, for all its faults, I really like the direction the DCEU has gone in, where, we're just apparently not going to care that much about continuity now, and we're just going to do things and try to make good films. So like Joker has no connection to Matt Reeves' Batman, and it's just going to be set off on its own little thing. And that's a movie where I'm like, I have no idea if I'm going to love it or hate it or anything. I'm just trying to reserve judgment till I see it. And no matter how I feel about it, it doesn't matter, because it's not going to affect how much I care about the other movies in the DCEU. And I really, really like that. So I like that it's kind of circumventing the question, I guess. I like that we're doing stuff now that's not going to bother with the question. And just going to, we'll make a new movie set in whatever way we want to set it whenever we want to, because guess what? If something crazy happens and Ben Affleck wants to come back for Batman, this leaves the door open to still do that, even if Matt Reeves does have a Batman solo film that's completely separate. So yeah, that's kind of been where my head's at on this thing. How about you, Alfie? What's your general take on this question?
So, it's one of those things where I almost feel like it's like two different questions, specifically when we talk about like the superhero stuff compared to the more general Hollywood stuff. Do you think that's like a fair comparison?
I definitely think so. I think like James Bond's definitely a lot different than like Batman, and that's... And both of those are completely separate entities to, like, I don't even know, like, other Hollywood reboot kind of things. I'm trying to think of other series that have been rebooted.
Like Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, I feel, is much harder to try and justify to a general audience, because unlike stuff that has a source material outside of films, be it comics or even something like Harry Potter, where you've got the books and you can base, or Lord of the Rings even, you've got a source material that can be adapted So there's always something else that will be able to be, oh, this is just a new interpretation of that thing in film. Whereas once you start taking things like, even something like Star Wars, once you start proposing to the idea to people, oh, what if they made a Luke Skywalker movie when he was younger and we cast like a different actor to play young Luke, people immediately get a lot more defensive about that, because once something's in film, people tend to see that as the source material and then adapt in different places. So reboots normally get much harsher of receptions and have to justify their existence a lot more. Superhero movies don't really have that. I think the only one who does is Batman, because Batman's also kind of became a movie icon in himself for a bit there. So people were very hesitant for when Ben Affleck was first cast. They said it was too soon after the Dark Knight trilogy. Whereas Batman Begins was normally just accepted because there had been a buffer period between that and Schumacher. So I feel like there's a bridge between superhero where I'm more lenient to your side, Ian, where I do think there doesn't really need to be any gap at all. You could just do different versions. But for actual, like, the main line, I do think there needs to be quite a large gap. Otherwise, it's like the thing with the Disney movies, with like they're doing the live action like Lion King and stuff. I feel like there's not really a point unless there's either a large enough gap of time where a new generation has to grow up on it, like, or at least two new generations where you can't just show them the old film, or there's something inherently like controversial or not so good that hasn't aged well in the older version, so we need to do a new take or something. That's where my stance is.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Disney, because like they are doing all these live action things of the movies that came out. At first it was like the 60s or the 40s and 60s, 40s and 50s and into the 60s. But then they pretty quickly went to Disney Renaissance by doing like Beauty and the Beast, and now Aladdin's coming out, and obviously Lion King. And that still feels kind of sort of okay because of the distance, but it would be weird if they did like a live action Frozen already, Yeah. That would feel odd. Not that I'm a fan of that film, but that would still feel really weird if they just went to that right away. So that's a good point that kind of counters my thing. How about you, Ruben? What are your general thoughts on this?
Well, I think you guys have brought up some really good points, because I was just thinking, I wasn't thinking about Disney at all, and since we're on that, I have not watched any of these live-action Disney remakes, partly because I'm not just the world's biggest fan of the animated movies. Like, I'm not going to be like, I'm an edgelord and I can't watch that kind of thing. It's not my bag. Mm-hmm. I like a few of those, like The Emperor's New Groove, I think is a criminally underrated movie, but the ones that are like, a princess who's looking for love and singing songs about it, that's just not my thing. But I don't see the point of doing those live action remakes, because from what I can tell, like this air quotes live action Lion King looks like it's just it's just the Lion King again. And it doesn't look like it's offering anything new, from where I can stand. And like Alfie mentioned, like it doesn't seem that long ago to me that the Lion King came out. And I know like I was a child, so it's been a good 25 years, but that doesn't seem that long ago for me. Like right now, I went to see Shazam on Monday, and there was a trailer for a movie called The Hustle with Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson. It is a remake of a movie. Actually, this is the third in a line of remakes, but the one I'm thinking of was from the 80s. It was called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and it had Michael Caine and Steve Martin. And I don't remember the name of the other one that was from the 60s, but this is now the second time it's been remade, and I think that's okay, because Dirty Rotten Scoundrels came out before I was born, and most people on the street are not going to be familiar with that movie. Now, people know who Michael Caine is, and people know who Steve Martin is, so it's not like this is some underground movie with actors you've never heard of before. Like, these are big actors, but this movie is one that a lot of people are not going to be familiar with, I think. Now, I could be wrong. It could be that everyone knows it more than what I'm giving it credit for, but I think in this case it's been long enough, and it's enough of a cult classic that it's okay to do a remake of it, and it looks like they're taking it in enough of a different direction that I'm interested to see what it's going to be. It's not just going to be a shot-for-shot remake with different actors, which is what it looks like with the Disney remakes. And you know, I never saw the Ghostbusters movie, the one with Kristen Wiig and everyone else who's in that. But from what I can tell, that was like not so much. That was more along the lines of Reboot, which I guess is a different conversation. But I wasn't sure if we'd have enough to talk about if we just limited it to remakes.
Yeah, I don't really know what you do, like, how much a remake versus reboot is a difference. I guess the distinction is a reboot is a new story and a remake is the same story. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, like, the more or less it's becoming that they just label something a reboot when they feel like it's been too soon and they think it's a rebranded. But most of the time it ends up just being the same thing we call a remake. I think there's, like, barely any distinction between the two words.
Okay, could you give like an example where you feel like it's branded as a reboot, but it might as well just be called a remake?
All right, so like The Amazing Spider-Man. A lot of people say that follows pretty much it's the Spider-Man origin still. It's not remake. It's not a complete change of that. It's not necessarily a remake of the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, but a lot of people have criticized it that it hyped up it would be a radically different take because they wanted to justify doing it so soon, when really it was still just Spider-Man.
No, I completely agree with that. That was my biggest problem with the first one. Is it was a little darker, more scenes were shot at night. But really, no, it did not feel significantly different, particularly by the time like the lizard showed up and everything. It just did not feel like that different a take on Spider-Man. That's a really, really good point.
That was actually what I was thinking of whenever I came up with this topic was when The Amazing Spider-Man came out. I remember seeing so many people say that it's too soon to do a reboot of Spider-Man, but these same people were saying that if this was a sequel, they would have said, what the heck took so long for a sequel if this was Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, etc., they would have said this took a really long time. But because it was a reboot, they were saying, wow, why did it take so long? And that bugged me so much. And like, you know, I'm kind of neutral on The Amazing Spider-Man. Like, you know, some people really love it. Some people just absolutely hate it. I think there were some good things about it. But it blew my mind that people were saying like, oh, it's okay for a sequel to come out within so much time, but a reboot is and I feel like they may have a valid point, but I don't think anyone could offer an explanation for why they thought that.
I think like that specific is a really good example to kind of like encapsulate this topic and maybe go deeper into it, because this kind of opens up, okay, so what is the mentality behind these? What compels a studio to do a remake or a reboot? And in Sony's case, it was very specifically Sam Raimi was given a date. I believe it was like 2011 or it was earlier than the actual release day of The Amazing Spider-Man. He was given a date to make Spider-Man 4, and if he didn't meet that, they were going to go with something else. So he was working towards it, but found it was too close and he needed more time to work things out. So they parted ways, and then they immediately moved to Reboot. And the reason why they did it so fast and so quickly, and they already had this planned, is because they didn't want the rights to revert back to Marvel. Mm-hmm. We're kind of past this era of companies being worried about the rights reverting back to Marvel because Marvel has everything now. But like, it was a genuine concern for a lot of like even the Fantastic Four or like any of these companies. Yeah, it's all these things these companies were like really hardcore motivated not to make films or remake for a purpose, be it to update it or give it to a new audience, but simply to hold on to it because it made money.
Yeah, and that like reminds me of kind of the worst case example of that, which is oh man, I can't even remember the name of it. I think it is still the newest one though. The 2011-2012 Hellraiser movie. I don't know if you guys know the story behind this one. I'm not like a huge Hellraiser fan or anything, but the movie was written and shot in a week, so they didn't lose the licensing. And so you could just imagine the quality of that, you know? It's like it was a direct to video release because like it's not like the original Fantastic Four '94 movie where they had to like, you know, they had to make it but didn't have to release it. It had to be made and released, so they released a direct to video Hellraiser movie. And it's kind of infamous for, you know, having to be shot and made in such a short amount of time, because the company didn't realize it was about to lose the rights. And, you know, now that it's been all these years later, I kind of wonder if they still have the rights, if it was even worth the effort, because I'm pretty sure they've never, unless I'm missing something, I'm pretty sure there's not been another Hellraiser movie in a good long while since that. Maybe because of that. But yeah, like, you are definitely onto something, that the need for, like, when is it what is the proper amount of time, doesn't really matter all that much, because the proper amount of time is often a legal distinction, or at least it was, and it seems we're getting far fewer of those now, as there's less worry about scrambling for the rights.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, there's a lot of argument about, okay, so are we going to enjoy these like blockbuster type like films? There's like a lot of like, are they products like just meant to make a book and then the film's second, or are we supposed to judge them as this is a director giving a vision? And a lot of people go back and forth on that, specifically once we get stuff like Logan and how the new Joker looks, when those specifically seem to be, these were made because someone had an idea, not necessarily because they thought it would. Obviously, if it's those big IPs, it's Wolverine and the Joker, of course they're going to make money, but it's less crowd pleasing focused, more so we've got a take. It doesn't matter what the continuity is like, it doesn't matter what the rest of the film slate is like, it's just this is a good take, or it's an interesting take, or it's a new take, and we're going to do it. That, I feel, is where you can get away with cast changes or having multiple actors playing the same character in different universes, because if you make that distinction, that say they were going to make a James Bond movie set in a different time period than modern day, while they were still doing the Daniel Craig movies, I think people will be more lenient with that, rather than just saying this is still a modern day James Bond movie with and it's all the James Bond trappings, while also going on at the same time as these other ones. I feel like in order to justify what we mentioned at the start, Ian, where it's like things, they're not really being a gap at all, people just doing things, that has to be substantially different, otherwise people will like, why does this exist?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the reason that works so well is I've wanted like movies to do this, particularly DC to do this, for years. Like I legit was, you know, post The Dark Knight, I was like, you know, they really should just do 3 Batman movies, one every year. One and just different continuities. One is a hard R, one is a PG-13, one's a straight G. And, you know, we're kind of getting that now. Like, I know a Joker movie isn't a Batman movie, but still. So we've got a hard R. We've got, you know, Matt Reeves, that's going to be your PG-13. And with all the, like, direct-to-video things that have been released lately, there's just a lot more content out there now, you know, 10, 11 years later, than there had been. Things have just changed that radically. And I just really like that kind of just give everybody something that they want, and, you know, and when not as much rides on this one thing that's only going to be this with this character every like 5 years, so it's got to please everybody. When there's a lot more variety of the characters in the universe out there, you can have more artistic expression, because not as much rides on each individual property, each individual project. It's one of the things I really, really like about the direction they're starting to take things in, and it's being done out of desperation, because they're just trying to figure out what would work and what they can actually make money back on. But damn, I'm really appreciating it because, you know, in like the lead up to Justice League, I was just sitting here and I'm like, just don't suck. And no, you know, like it's just you have so little investment in it, and like I can't even watch that movie just as like, I mean, it's still a Justice League movie because it's all tied up in all the bullshit from Batman vs Superman. It's caught up in its own legacy, and I can't distance myself from it in that way. But with like, but you know, branching out, doing all this other, you know, variety stuff, it doesn't matter that I hate Batman vs Superman and Justice League because Joker's coming out and it's going to be basically its own thing, and Matt Reeves' Batman is coming out and it's going to be basically its own thing. It might have a couple like wink wink nudge nudges to the Affleck movies, but I doubt it. I'm so much more okay with that. Hell, even the new Suicide Squad's gonna practically abandon the first one.
Yeah, I'm still. I mean, this is, you know, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm still a little confused about just how much of a remake / reboot the Suicide Squad movie is going to be, because I've heard that Jai Courtney, however you say his name, he's going to be in it. So it's like, okay, it's kind of a sequel then, but then I don't know. Anyway, so like one thing that as a like. When I was younger, I got really not upset. I got a little miffed whenever, like, you can do Smallville. Smallville's going around for 10 years, and this is a particular version of Superman. And then while that's going on, you can do Superman Returns, which is a completely separate Superman. And everyone understood that. Okay, these are two separate versions of Superman. They're not connected. No one is confused. But then once the animated The Batman started, suddenly the Justice League cartoon was not allowed to use any Batman characters except for Batman and Joker in the Justice League cartoon. And then when there was even a hint that there was going to be a live-action Aquaman series starring Justin Hartley, then Justice League was not allowed to use Aquaman characters, including Aquaman. And that, I don't know, I just thought that was really weird. And now we've kind of gone in the exact opposite direction, which is what you were saying, Ian. And I think to a degree it's fine, because, like, you know, I wouldn't mind having, you know, you got your Batman in your TV and your Batman in your movies. But now I almost want to say we're going too far in this direction. Like, we've got an evil, crazy Batman in the Titans TV show on the DC Universe. And then we've got your teenage Batman who can't even shave yet in Gotham. And then you've got your murder-happy Batman in the Justice League Snyder movies. And then, you know, you'll have a different Batman in Matt Reeves, and maybe a Batman in the Todd Phillips Joker. And I almost think, like, I really like, because what we were kind of dancing around this gives movie makers a chance to just do a movie that they want to do. Like, if you have a vision, you can just do a movie. You don't have to bow down to the needs of the creative, the shared universe. You know, someone like who was the guy who did Hot Fuzz? He almost did Ant-Man.
Edgar Wright.
Yeah, so everyone in the world was like really excited for an Ant-Man movie by Edgar Wright, but then it ultimately didn't happen because the shared universe, it was creative differences. That was the famous, like, it didn't happen because of creative differences. And we're not going to have that with DC probably ever again, because if Todd Phillips's ideas for a Joker don't match Matt Reeves or Jared Leto or David Ayer, if these guys can't come to an agreement on what the Joker is, that's okay. We can just have 3 different Jokers. And I like that from a creative standpoint. I like that these movie makers are able to do what they want to do without having to bow to the needs of the studio. But I'm afraid this will, you know, we've been hearing rumors of like, we're on the edge of like superhero movie burnout, like when there's 5 superhero movies a year and it's like, when are we going to get to that point where people are going to get sick and tired of this? And I'm definitely getting close to it, but I've been saying that for years, and I don't know when it's actually going to happen. But like, you know, I went this week to watch a superhero movie kind of reluctantly because I was like, that came out this week, I guess I need to go watch that, you know, for my channel. But like, when we're getting like multiple versions of a character on screen, on either on TV or in movies, I feel like that's hastening that kind of burnout.
I mean, it's possible, but I guess at the same time, I'd say maybe it doesn't, because maybe it offers people the variety to not go see it. If they're just not, like, it... You know, like, I remember being, you know, the Nolan films kind of made me fall in love with comics and superheroes and Batman. And I remember having arguments with a bunch of gatekeepy guys who are like, oh, that's not a real Batman, his ears are too short. And like... I'm not kidding. That was a real argument. Just all this stuff. I remember that, and like, on one level, I'm gonna like, oh, get the fuck over it. Just realize it's a good movie in its own merits. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but like, how cool would it be to just be able to skip a thing? You know how much less we would have made fun of Batman vs Superman if there was just other Batman stuff in popular release coming out at around the same time? You didn't have to wait 3 years for it. You know, like, just, you know, it would be a blip of like, but now we've got like Lego Batman that makes fun of that fucking movie, and it's great. Like, I mean, it's sad, but the Lego Batman movie is one of the best Batman movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so damn good. And it's because it's able to have this variety to it. It's able to go off and kind of do its own thing. And, you know, like, maybe I'm going to take over the show again just so we can do an episode on each of these. Have you guys watched the CGI Lego DC superhero movies?
No.
I watched one of them on Netflix, or it wasn't Netflix. It was a Charter on Demand. I remember very little about it, but I watched one of them.
Okay. Literally, those are great. You know, Aquaman Rage of Atlantis is great. It's really cool if you're a Green Lantern the Animated Series fan. They got the guy that voiced Atrocitus from the show to come back and reprise the role for the Lego movie. They got, what is it, Lego Reverse Flash or something like that is a really good one. It's a Flash movie before you'll ever see a live action Flash movie. Goddammit. It's not like groundbreaking. It's not amazing. It's got like a really obvious lesson because they're obviously geared towards kids. But you know, they're fun. They're G-rated movies, and they're a fucking shared universe. And it all spins out of the fact that they took the cinematics from Lego Batman 2 and cut it into a movie. And it's just like, there's where your shared universe starts.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes. Like, there's, I think, 3 or 4 Justice League movies, and there's the Aquaman and the Flash, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, stuff like that I'm like really glad about, because the whole like variety thing is something that was my biggest problem with a lot of things, especially with like talking to people who like really like are big fans of like the DCU specifically, with like these are what we really want, or like you don't care that this is a new take, this is a deconstruction, and it'd be especially being a Superman
once this
fan,
fucking movie takes your virginity.
yeah, basically, I need to get out of my fucking dream world. But so like my biggest issue was always I was just, how fucked is it that there hasn't been a Superman movie in what, like, over, you could stretch this to like over a decade, that I could take my little brother to go see. Like, that's fucked to me. But if there was variety, if there was like more like typical Superman movie that was, like you say, maybe a G-rated live-action Superman movie, or even just like an animated one or something, that I could say, okay, this is the Superman movie that I could take my little brother to, and he'd be introduced to the character, and we'll have a good time, and people can enjoy that for like that. And then if Zack Snyder wants to go off the fucking walls and do his version, sure, whatever. It doesn't harm it, therefore. But the reason why, when we did have these long gaps in between different things, and these takes would stick for so long, it would really be detrimental to the character, because it'd be a lot of people's first introductions, like you were saying with the Dark Knight, like the Dark Knight trilogy. That was a lot of first people's introductions to like that kind of Batman. The same was that for the back in the day, it was the '89 movie for Batman, or like the Adam West show for even older. people are colored by what their first interpretation of a character is.
Oh no,
And they'll
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry.
And what they'll compare that. No, it's completely fine. You agree to my point. So it's like that then spreads out and can then impact the next generation of creators or filmmakers. And you'll see this comic book writers who grew up on a certain like period of like Batman the Animated Series. Is you're seeing that with James Tynion. He's like super Batman the Animated Series heavy with how he writes. These kind of stuff do impact these characters outside of the source material. And I feel like we're going to go to a generation in what, like 10, 15, 20 years maybe, where a lot of people's first exposure is going to be Man of Steel or Batman vs. Superman. And I'm not looking forward to that.
No, you're right. Like, dude, I remember talking to a friend, you know, in between, you know, before we got any news of who was going to be in Dark Knight Rises, villains, stuff like that. And I was like, man, I really want them to do Riddler and Bane. And my friend straight looks at me, dead serious. This is how he thought it works. And he goes, but how would you do the mind control in the Nolanverse? Because fucking Joel Schumacher randomly decided that the Riddler mind controls people. And it's never been a thing, and I've never read a Riddler story where he mind controls someone. I've sought out so many Riddler stories, and I've never found one where he mind controls someone. And yet, that was such a pervasive thing with the character, because it's been so long since we've had a mass interpretation of the character in that light. And so people just think the Riddler mind controls people, and that the Penguin was born, you know, a freak, and that the Joker killed Batman's parents. That's like still a thing. And it's just, yeah, it's crazy the way that these one interpretations can stick for so incredibly long. You know, forgive me.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, forgive me, but I do kind of want to transition a bit since we've been talking so heavily DC, because this brings an interesting question to my mind. But Ruben, you were gonna kick in real quick, so why don't you kick in and then we'll transition a bit.
I was just gonna say I think that era of this movie makes people think this one thing. I think that's over now, and maybe I'm just naive because I'm more knowledgeable about comics now. But like, I grew up watching the Burton movies. Like, for me, it was weird because I had the 1960s movie, the 1989 movie, and Batman the Animated Series all simultaneously informing me of who Batman was. But like, I don't remember which one came to me first. They were all just kind of hitting me all at once. But you know, back in the 80s, like, all that people had was the Tim Burton Batman movie. And like, you know, all that people had for, you know, Superman was the Christopher Reeve like, yes, there was like the Superboy TV show, and like people who were you know, a good deal older than my parents will remember George Reeve, but like now, because you've got so much more content, regardless of the quality, you're not going to have this one, like, people are not going to say like, oh, you know, like the Red Skull killed Captain America's parents or whatever, because like there's 1,000 different versions of any character, and there's so many more characters that are out there. Like in the 80s, you had a Flash TV show and you had a Batman movie, and that was about it. Like, you didn't have the whole DC universe being represented. And so now I don't think we're going to have a thing where, like, you know, people may remember the Green Lantern live action movie, and they may say, like, you know, hey, you know, Hal Jordan was childhood friends with Hector Hammond. Like, I don't think you're going to have that as much now, because these characters are being represented, like, in individual characters getting, you know, multiple versions, and also multiple characters are getting versions. So it kind of spreads it out a little bit, I guess, if that makes any sense.
My favorite misinterpretation that ever came out of the Green Lantern movie was just in the trailers era of it. And it was all in one tweet. And it wasn't even a long tweet. Man, Marvel's fucking up by making Green Lantern white. I love that. I will always remember that. Yeah, that was one of my favorites. Okay, but I did want to transition and talk about Marvel a bit here, because, you know, with the MCU going on for so long now, and the Infinity Saga wrapping up, in at the end of this month. When will it be too soon to reboot the Marvel Universe?
I think it would be too soon because
No, like when will it be? Like how far? Like if is it going to go in perpetuity? Are we just never going to reuse characters, or will we do reboots within the universe and still have them be in continuity with the old ones? Like what's going to happen with that? You know?
I think it is entirely dependent on what Endgame does. Like, I don't think it can be understated, like, how much is whatever this movie goes with certain, like, things or whatever they decide to do, is going to impact how the entire brand moves forward. If they, like, really do commit to killing characters off, like, completely, and they're just gone out, or they get a send-off, and it's the character that gets a send-off, and that's it, they're done. Like, we're not going to get any more, like, I don't know, Tony Stark movies or Thor movies or something, or whatever they do. If they commit to that, I think then that adds an expiration date. Because you're right, they're going to want to reuse characters. People are always going to want to write about Tony Stark or do a Tony Stark movie or something. He's just reached that kind of level. Or same with Steve Rogers, Captain America. Like, those characters aren't just going to go away forever and they'll just continue. Even if we do get legacy characters. That puts an expiration date on it. It's still a long-ass expiration date because they've talked about how long they want to keep this going. But I do think, like, 20 years max, I think. Even that's, like, quite crazy to think of, but I can see them doing it, especially with all the new materials they've got with, like, Fox and X-Men. I can see it lasting at least that long, or at max. I think that's the expiration date. If they don't go with that, if it leads to recasting, which Kevin Feige has said, he says he wants to treat these characters like James Bond, and we just use these films as send-offs to the actors, maybe give the characters a break or something, and then bring them back with an in-the-universe explanation about, oh, the actors changed, and they have a wink at the audience, something, hey, you look different than before, something like that, and then they move on with the movies and just keep the stories going. No, I don't think it will ever end. I think this will just become, we will transit, because I think by the time the MCU just keeps going, the comic industry will either have completely changed or it won't be around anymore, and then that will just be the new material for how stories are told. Because we're right now in an era, specifically with Marvel, where things are changing completely with how these stories and characters are told. The Marvel comics are no longer the main source material for these characters. The movies are, because that's what the comics are now being written based on, and that's what the games are being written based on, and that's what the Legos are being written based on. DC is still doing most of their other media adaptations comic-based. Marvel hasn't, and that's how they haven't for the last few years. Like, even the Lego games, completely MCU-based. I feel with whatever happens with, like, the Disney streaming service show and all of this will just be Marvel now going forward in a few years. There will not be Marvel comics. It will just be Marvel, the brand, through TV, live action, and animation.
That's a really interesting idea. I hadn't thought of it in that regard. But you're really onto something, because Marvel is pulling from their comics, but they're pulling from comics for the last, like, 15, 20 years. They're not pulling from classic Silver Age stuff. They're really pulling from newer material. Like, Extremis was around, like, right before the first Iron Man movie came out, and then it was adapted into the third one. That's crazy when you think of it that way. So yeah, I that's an interesting take. I think a lot of the Marvel stuff just gets, the comics kind of become a proving ground for ideas to be adapted into movies. But yeah, I think you might be onto something. So yeah, like, but will they ever reboot the MCU, or are they gonna ride this ship till it crashes? And the mythical foretold of people will be tired of superhero movies eventually. They've been saying that shit for like 15 years. Like, that's the funny thing. This is a little bit too much of a separate topic, but, like, people are tired of superhero movies. They're going the way of the Western. Was the argument being used against the first Iron Man? It's like that was what they were saying. You know, people are tired of superhero movies. They're going the way of the Western. That's why they're having to dip into these B and C level characters like Iron Man, and then that's the start of the MCU. So I'm not of the opinion that superhero movies are ever going away because they have the variety of subgenres within them. Superhero isn't a genre unto itself. But at the same time, I do know a lot of people who are kind of getting sick of the MCU, which is funny because I'm now finally just getting super into it. I was a bit of a naysayer on the MCU for quite a while there, and now it's finally hitting a turning point for me, and I'm really, really getting invested. But yeah, it's definitely changing, and so I wonder, like, will they write it till people are done with superhero movies? Could you ever reboot the MCU? Would the same trick work twice? I don't know. It's interesting to think about in that regard. And then, even if you were going to, how would you wait?
I don't know if they could just say, okay, this, Iron Man to, whatever movie's coming out in the year 2030, that's going to be it, and we're going to start over with a brand new Marvel film verse. I don't think that people would be into that. I don't think that the layman film goer would be into that idea, and I think it would crash pretty hard if they tried to just reboot wholesale. I really like the idea that Alfie said, and I didn't know that Kevin Feige had said that he was into the James Bond idea, because I remember years ago, like when the first Avengers movie came out, Robert Downey Jr. was then saying that he wasn't sure if he was going to come back, and of course he's been in like 4 Marvel movies since then. So like he's now he's made the role his, but I remember when he was saying he wasn't sure if he was going to come back, and like I had friends who were hardcore Iron Man fans, and they were saying nobody can ever play Iron Man, it's only Robert Downey Jr. And I was saying, like, people probably said the same thing about James Bond back in the 60s, and we've had so many people who have made that role theirs. Even if you don't like Roger Moore, there's plenty of flavor out there now, and like you can just pick and choose whatever you like, and the world isn't going to end if someone else plays Iron Man. I think. Now, I also say that because we've had 60 years of Iron Man stories in the comics, and I think if you want these movies to really become everlasting in the same way the comics are, and timeless in the same way the comics are, you will have to recast these people. And they did a little bit in the beginning. Rhodey was played by Terrence Howard, and like it's almost impossible to think of that, like how some of these characters are just being written out, like Jane Foster, and then some of the actors are being recast. But now they've stuck with some of these actors for a while, so it would probably be really weird if the movie after Avengers Endgame we just had a different guy playing the Hulk, and everyone was just like, "Oh, hey, Banner, how you doing?" Like,
could we get Ed Norton back? Am I the only one that would want that?
Oh, I would want it, because I'm convinced that that's the only reason that we don't have a solo Hulk movie. I'm pretty sure Universal has casting rights on that, and I think they just don't like Mark Ruffalo, and so that's why we haven't gotten a solo Hulk movie since Incredible Hulk. I'm almost 100% about that.
That's interesting.
Do what?
I said that's interesting. I didn't know that they had the casting right. I knew it had something related to the Hulk, but I didn't know they had the casting right specifically. Which is ironic, because apparently the reason they'd stopped working with Edward Norton is because he was hell on set and they couldn't deal with him.
Oh, yeah, see, I had heard...
no, from what I heard, Marvel dropped Norton because he was like, "Oh yeah, the Avengers. Here's my script for that."
Well, that sounds kind of like being a pain in the ass there.
Yeah.
I knew he had like done a lot of retooling on the Incredible Hulk script, but I didn't know he was. I hadn't heard anything about how he acted on set though.
I'm still tripping over the scene in Avengers where they reference the deleted scene from the Incredible Hulk. That's the weirdest shit to me in the world, I don't think I'll ever truly be over that. Oh man, I'm the only person on the planet that likes the Ed Norton Hulk film. I'm convinced.
No, there's 2 of us.
Okay.
And like, I'll talk to someone and they'll. You like it too?
Yeah, I think it's all right.
Oh yeah, because like I'll talk to someone and they'll say like in their bottom 5 MCU movies, and they'll list Incredible Hulk, and I'm like, technically you're probably not wrong, but I still love that movie.
I mean, I think it's a great fucking movie. Everyone's like, oh, well, if you're a fan of the TV show, then you'll like the movie. But if you're a fan of the comics, then you won't. I'm like, well, fuck it. The TV show is the best thing ever done with the Hulk, so fuck off.
Nice.
Yeah, so, I don't know. I'm not sure how much of this conversation is actually related to the topic at hand, but it's very close to it. Because you kind of can't help but think of these... You know, is the MCU now the biggest cinematic franchise ever?
Yeah, I wouldn't even have to look at any numbers to say it. I mean, maybe Star Wars, but...
No, I mean, like, as far as just number of films. Because, like,
definitely.
Bond's had, like, 25, and Godzilla's had a bunch, too, and I'm just not sure.
I think MCU's on, like, 22, 24.
Okay.
Well, and like with Bond, it gets a little dicey because like there was one Sean Connery movie that's not technically part of that line. I don't remember, but it's a remake of an earlier Connery movie. And then like with Godzilla, isn't there like a couple of different air quotes eras that are not part of? So like even there, like you may have had like 30 Godzilla movies, but they're not all part of the Godzilla universe. So I think when you just look at MCU, I think it is the biggest. I would say.
I mean, like, it's definitely the biggest, like, franchise that's all a shared universe, that's for sure. I was just trying to think of, like, you know, as far as cinematic franchises that are, you know, legacy and going on for years and years. And yeah, the MCU's definitely the biggest in that regard. I don't know, it's just crazy to think about, like, could you even reboot that thing? Like, if, say they end it and, like, at the end, the final end credit stinger is, you know, the Watcher coming out and is like, oh, well, that was an interesting universe. Let's go look at Universe 617. You know, like, what would that be like if that was just like the last scene of the MCU as we know it was that, and then they just immediately start it back over? Could you do that? It's just kind of crazy. Maybe that's going to be the way they get a new actor in for Captain America and Iron Man. They're just gonna pull a Tony Stark from another universe in.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, that's one of the few things the MCU hasn't dealt with yet is parallel worlds. I mean, I guess the closest you get is Doctor Strange. So, I don't know. That's an interesting way to think of it.
And then we're definitely getting that for 100%, which is interesting, like, if they ever pull from this with the Disney show, they're doing, like, the What If animation. The actual plot of one's just got announced, which is going to be Peggy Carter if she became Cap instead of Steve. So that's already...
man, that sounds great.
They're getting all the actors back to voice it as well. So it's going to be interesting, like, if that's their first venture into a multiverse, and will that just remain there? I imagine if it got super popular, they're going to want to bring it in.
Dude, do you know how many people I would kill for Chris Evans to be written off and for Peggy Carter from the alternate universe where she became Captain America to be brought into the MCU proper, played by Haley Atwell? I would be so there for that. Give me the number of people I have to kill. I'll do it.
All they have to do is say that, you know how in the first Avenger, how Red Skull, he grabs the cube and then falls out of the plane or whatever and like disappears onto that planet, I guess. Just have it where Haley Atwell in this alternate universe grabs the cube and is teleported into our universe, or the MCU. Yeah, I can deal with that.
Yeah, I'd be there for that. I'll say I don't know if you can really use that trick twice. Like, I don't think you can use that trick separately 2 times. I think you kind of gotta, if you're gonna do it, you gotta bring in everyone that you're gonna do it with all at once. But that could be cool as shit. I don't know. They might be waiting to do that with like the X-Men or something. Because I don't think you can Wakanda the X-Men into the MCU at this point. So that's gonna be a whole thing. They can't have always been there. They kind of need to be an established thing for a while. I might eat my words on that, but I don't know. The more I think about it.
Or they could just say, hey, mutants are just now becoming a thing. That's kind of what I'm hoping they're doing. I really don't want them to say, like, here's 10,000 X-Men characters from an alternate reality. And I also don't want them to connect it to the Fox movies because...
Oh, God, please no.
Like, those movies really did help make me an X-Men fan today, but I don't want them now. Like, thanks, but no thanks. Like,
the X-Men movies are another good one to talk about as far as, like, too soon for a reboot, because you had X3, which was a critical failure, and then you had X-Men Origins Wolverine, also a critical failure, and then you have the reboot that wasn't a reboot with First Class 2 years later. Yeah, that's... what?
I think, we were talking about how Amazing Spider-Man, the only reason a reason that they made it as soon as they did was to keep the rights. I could be wrong, but I think that was true for Origins and First Class. I think definitely for Origins. I think part of the reason that movie is such a mess is they were apparently still tinkering with the script like during filming, which explains so much of why that movie sucks balls. And also, like, it was just they were like, oh wait, we've got to do an X-Men movie. It was an incredible lack of forward thinking there. But I want to say they did the same thing with First Class, where it's like, we have to do another X-Men movie every so often or we'll just lose the rights. But yeah, you're right. Like, the X-Men movies just every movie for the last, 10 years has been a reboot.
Like, they tried so hard to make it all work together. And by that, I mean, they didn't try it all. They just said it was all together. It's just nuts to look at when you try to, like, really break it down and think about it. It's a reboot. First Class is a reboot through and through. I don't care that Hugh Jackman's in it. I mean, here's the thing. Hugh Jackman has played X1, 2, and 3, so there's one version of Wolverine. X Origins, there's a second version of Wolverine. X-Men First Class, there's a third version of Wolverine. The Wolverine, there's a... I guess the Wolverine has to be in the 1, 2, 3 continuity, so we're still only at 3. And then Logan. Logan's...
Who the heck knows?
Yeah, so we got... Hugh Jackman's played 4 different continuities of Wolverine. Convince me otherwise. That's just all I can come down on it, because he's one of the few things that shared between all the movies... And I don't buy it. I don't buy that those things are truly connected the way they try to pretend that they are. Because...
Okay, picture this. You know how we had the movie Spider-Verse? We have Logan-verse with Hugh Jackman playing every character.
I'm okay with this.
Yes.
Particularly, I'm very interested in his take on Wolvie. The one from the cutesy X-Men universe, where they, like, smell pies and shit like that.
I thought you were going to say the one where he's made of tiny Wolverines.
No, that'd be amazing. Just a bunch of Wolverines in a suit.
Yeah.
Finally, we've got a short actor to play Wolverine.
I mean, like, is it fair to say I'd be more terrified of a bunch of Wolverines shoved into a costume together than I would be of the Wolverine?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that makes sense, yeah.
As long as one of them has a cigar in their mouth.
One of the Wolverines or one of the two characters? Because I'm okay with all the Wolverines all munching on
all
those
the
icy
Wolverines.
Oh, that's a fun one. Yeah, I don't know. Like, the X-Men movies are just... a nightmare. Like, I see so many people do their Marvel MCU timelines, their DCAU timelines, and all this stuff. God, I've never even bothered to try to see someone do it with the X-Men films. There's gotta be a bad future, right? Like, that's the only way to do it.
It's like those, did you get angry today? And then it's like yes and no, and then it's like the no, it's like, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like it branches off into, it's like X-Men, and it all just ends with, is this a crappy future? Like, they all end at that.
It's like the Zelda timeline.
Oh, man. Yeah, that shit. I mean, I guess there's a topic we haven't touched on yet. We can kind of get the last few minutes on this. How about it with games? Do the rules change at all with games? I think they change like week to week with comics, so I don't even want to bother trying to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. But what about rebooting and relaunching games?
I think the most common one it seems to be is the minimum has to be like a system generation apart. I don't think there's any justification for remaking or doing what they normally do is like the remastering of a game while it's still out on that current generation of consoles. There's no like improvements that could be made by the development team learning from the mistakes or anything. It's just an extra coat of polish, barely. So I feel like that's the minimum, and I'm normally okay with that because before we had like a lot of games that don't have backwards compatibility, so you can't play like a PlayStation 2 game on a PlayStation 3 in the later versions at least. So that was a big thing. So they just make the remakes, and you still get to play that game you liked, and it's got a bit of a graphical update sometimes. Sometimes they just port it straight. So that I think is the common practice. The really good ones are the ones like the latest Resident Evil one, where there's a good gap of time, and the development team has got to go back and do the ideas they originally had for the old one, but they couldn't because of hardware limitations. I think ones like that are like, or even on the Zelda thing, Breath of the Wild is basically the most graphical HD pitch of the original Legend of Zelda there ever was. It's a remake basically of that game, but with all the improvements we've had since the NES. So I think stuff like that is completely fine. But then you get things like, I don't even know if this counts, but every Sonic game has to have a version of Green Hill Zone apparently, and it got old the second time they did it.
The one I always think about with rebooted video games is PS2. Well, hold on, I'll go back further. NES, you have Prince of Persia. And then PS2 GameCube era, you have Prince of Persia Sands of Time, which is its own thing. It's a reboot. It's just taking the concept of rewinding the gameplay and trying to make a story out of it with the Persian theme. And that gets a trilogy. And then PS3, you get a new game kind of based on the concept, lots of parkour running and rewinding time, but it's a reboot of this series, and that sold for shit. It was a terrible game. And then you get the 2010 Jake Gyllenhaal movie Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. And that was not a good movie, but it had a tie-in game also called Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. So you had a video game based on a movie based on a video game that was itself a remake of a video game. And it gets so nutty at a certain point. So if we're gonna go for the ultimate, tangled web of reboot, remake, adaptation, I think Prince of Persia takes the cake.
Yeah, that's definitely like... I'm starting to feel like the production history of that makes you feel like you're going back in time. So really it's the ultimate Prince of Persia.
Oh man, I just got Prince of Persia. Yeah.
I don't really play a whole lot of video games, but like the ones I do play, I feel like there's so little continuity, and each game is kind of just a soft reboot anyway. Like I was really huge into Pokemon when that was getting big in America, and like the first generation of games was its own thing, and then the second generation was air quotes a sequel to those games, but it's basically taking the same story idea. Like you go around and you fight these gym leaders, and then you fight the Elite Four, and you're fighting Team Rocket, and you're trying to catch them all. Like it's the same shtick. It's just, different character, different cities. They look a little different, and there's a few different mechanics that are there. But it feels a lot like, Gold and Silver feel like a remake of Red and Blue to me. I mean, there's, like I say, a few surface changes, and then you get to, like, each game is basically that same story engine. It's just, we're going to add another 100 Pokemon with each generation. And then, like, with Mario, that's another one that I played some when I was younger. Like, each game kind of feels like it's just its own thing, and it's just, here's Mario and he can do different things here. But I'm probably not contributed that much to the video game conversation here, because I don't know a lot about, like, these air quotes, like, really deep games like Uncharted, or the games that look really good with the great graphics. I don't know anything about those, so I don't know, like, how sequel-y they are, or if it's just each game is its own thing.
Well, like, I really like that you mentioned Mario, because one of my favorite things about Super Mario Maker, probably the game I have the most admiration for, even though I've never actually played it, is there's the gameplay mode of 100 Mario Challenge, where you have 100 lives and you play through X number of stages created by people all over the world. But every game opens the same, where you got 2 castles, one's Princess Toadstool's and one's Bowser's, and you see Peach getting taken from her castle by 2 Goombas to Bowser's castle, and it just says, Princess Peach has been kidnapped, parentheses, again. So I think every 100-man run anyone has ever done is in continuity with the Mario games at this point, because of the way that sets it up. So take that how you will. I find that amusing. But yeah, Mario's got kind of like that timeless thing, so you never technically need to reboot it. It can be a million things. It doesn't really have a continuity. It's just over and over and over again. It's this continuing thing.
I would say the same thing, because I think you actually, although you said you didn't know much, Ruben, you touched on a lot more important to, like, genre of video games as a whole than, like, a lot of modern games are, because Mario and Pokemon specifically were the things that kind of kickstarted the endless sequel thing. They were the things. If you look at, like, if you say Iron Man is what kind of started the scramble, or even the Avengers is what started the scramble in Hollywood movies to make franchises, to make shared universes, Mario and Pokemon, and to a lesser extent Zelda, they were the things that made video games want to do that too. It's what directly led to characters like Sonic and stuff. So I think you touched on a really good point there, is Pokemon specifically. Yes, every game is in a timeline. Some go back and before Red and Blue, some take place like 10 years after. But they're all very much still, you are a 10-year-old child from a town, and then you want to go collect them all and collect all the badges and fight the Elite Four, with minor variations here and there. So yes, they are very much remakes, but at the same time they are progressing the story. They're introducing new regions, new aspects of the same world. So with any case, it's a lot like I guess the best example would be like a comic book, where a story might get told where a new city in, like, the DC universe is introduced, and then it's implied, oh, this was there the entire time, it's just no one had a story about it since then. And it's basically the same self as there's a superhero in a super city where it has villains and there's a rogues gallery. And like, if you want to boil it down to base brass tacks, a lot of superheroes just basically, like, if you want to go like really meta and like big brain meme, you could say every single superhero is a remake of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's like that really great place. There's that, I think it's like in what was that comic book that Grant Morrison did? I think with like the Milkman, the Superman.
Yeah, it was a Doom Patrol something crossover, the Milk Wars or something.
Yeah, and there was a panel in that where they tried to find the formula of superheroes, and it was Superman take away or plus or change, and that's it. And that's what everything is just boiled down to base. So I feel like if you really want to go like, how long does it take to be a remake or stuff with like individual characters like Mario, where you can put them into different situations and then they're still the same character, you can go on that for like so many different levels, especially with comic characters.
Yeah. I don't know, it's just... the thing with like the idea of how soon is or late is it for a reboot is ultimately, I think, like kind of pointless, or not pointless, but ultimately kind of not relevant because they're going to do it no matter what. I don't think there's ever going to be a movie or something released where it's like, oh, that was just too soon, as like the objective thing that's wrong with it, because a good movie is a good movie is a good movie, right? And if a movie's just good, it doesn't matter if we just had a Superman movie the week before. If it sucked and the one that came out a week later is great, well, then it doesn't matter. The good one's the one that people will actually remember and look to fondly. You know, the bad one might get made fun of, but that's going to be its legacy. So the idea of, like, is it ever too soon to do a reboot? Not really. Though it helps when you actually have a story to tell, when you actually have a take, it makes the reboot stronger. Is I guess kind of where I think I come down on it at.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, there have been times where I would think, like, okay, it, like, where you'll hear an announcement, and I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but it's like if a TV show or something is going on, and then they'll make an announcement like, hey, we're going to do this, you know, thing, and it's a, you know, just basically rehashing that show or whatever. And I really wish I could think of a good example, or like of a movie. Like, it seems like I was hearing, you know, and a lot of it was just ultimately people spreading rumors. But like before The Dark Knight Rises even came out, I remember people throwing out like, okay, here's what the next Batman movie's going to be. And, you know, it's like, come on, let's go ahead and like enjoy this one before we start like trying to figure out what our next reboot is going to be.
Yeah, that got really annoying. I remember the rumor mill for that. I bet you can still find all the fake news videos on YouTube.
My favorite ones are the Joseph Gordon-Levitt badly photoshopped faces on like Nightwing bodies. Oh, they made me laugh so much.
I mean, that, to be fair, that is not entirely off. My favorite, this is Bill Zazubar. My favorite conversation about The Dark Knight Rises is, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not super corny to call him Robin. It's just like, it's not even a guy's name. I'm like, Bill, Robin Williams. He's like, oh, okay, never mind.
They really messed up making Batman a white guy.
Man, Marvel really fucked up making Green Lantern white. That's still one of my favorites. There's so much wrong with the tweet, but it's so right. Alrighty. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode. I think we got to some interesting places. Ruben, did we answer your question?
Yeah. I even if we didn't, I think we had some really good discussion on it.
Okay. It seems every couple years or not years necessarily, it seems every so often we end up just doing a Geeky Gentleman that's somehow or other related to reboots or remakes, and you think we'd be repeating ourselves, and I really don't think we have. So I think
we're really good at remakes.
Yeah. Anyway. Alright. So, Alfie, it'll be your turn. We need a review topic, sir.
Do any of you have the first volume of Nightwing Rebirth?
No.
Yes, but if he doesn't, then
I mean, I can get it. It's not a big deal. Like, it's just a trade. I can go grab that at my local comic shop.
All right, that I think would be interesting because it's something unique done with the character that hasn't been done since, and it's just only in that trade as kind of a standalone thing. Okay.
All right. Can you? What's the title of it? Do you know?
Better Than Batman.
Okay. Well, that's just wrong, but okay.
Maybe reading this might let you prove you right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be doing that next week. Everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.